Shanghai has reported its first 3 deaths from COVID-19 in its ongoing outbreak. More than 23,000 cases have been reported in 24 hours alone. Now, spikes like these have led to authorities locking down the city of 25 million for 3 straight weeks. It's part of the zero COVID policy dictated by Beijing. But this strategy of immediately isolating people to break off infection chains has led to non-availability of essential items, resulting in anger on the streets.
Rare scenes of dissent hinting at growing anger under Shanghai's lockdown. Police and protective gear put an end to what was reportedly a protest against plans to set up an isolation complex in this neighborhood.
All of us here are law-abiding citizens. We want to do what we can to help the country. You prohibited us from meeting others or even going outside anywhere, and we complied. But now you want to put highly infectious people less than 20 meters away from where we live? What more do we have to put up with?
Loudspeakers summon residents to come out of their homes for mandatory testing. Anyone who tests positive is sent to an isolation center for at least a week of observation, regardless whether they show symptoms. With as many as 1,000 people packed into makeshift facilities, living conditions there are also a source of frustration.
The bathrooms are not very clean. That's understandable because so many people are using them, and cleaners and volunteers can't keep up, so they're a little dirty. And we haven't been able to take a warm shower. The lights are on all night long, so it's hard to fall asleep. These are the things that people are complaining about most.
Doctors come by twice a day to take patients' temperature. With many exhibiting no symptoms at all, increasingly people are more concerned about the hardships the outbreak is causing than the virus itself.
At first, people were scared of the virus and were panicking. But with the figures that are being published every day, people have started to accept the fact that this particular virus is not that horrible. So I think there's been a change in everyone's thinking.
But so far, there's no sign of a change in thinking by China's communist leaders. They continue to insist that the country must stick to its tough measures aimed at eliminating the virus.
Joining me now is correspondent Fabian Kretschmer, who is based in Beijing. Fabian, 3 COVID deaths in a population of 25 million in Shanghai. It sounds incredible there aren't more fatalities.
Well, we know at least of another dozen elderly who died after contracting the virus. They died in a nursing home, and they all didn't show up in the official statistics. So at least it's safe to assume that it's not transparent to what criteria the authorities use of underlying conditions or whether the virus is responsible for the death. I wouldn't take the official data at face value. Probably the death rate especially is much higher. And we should also not forget that there's an increasing number of deaf people, not caused by the virus itself, but by the lockdown measures. For example, asthma patients, cancer patients, patients who have not received treatment on time because of the lockdown restrictions.
And these lockdown restrictions are also appearing to force many Shanghai residents to deal with a number of shortages. Can you talk a bit about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, for most residents that I talk to, basically food supply and water supply is still the biggest topic. They're worried. However, to some degree, the supply situation has improved, however, only at a very slow rate. And most of the voices that we hear and also the residents that I talk to are rather privileged. There are many so muted voices, basically, let's say migrant workers, lesser privileged people. Their situation, of course, is even more dire. So I would say it's still quite a precarious situation for most of the 26 million residents.
You spoke a bit about earlier about a number of elderly people dying possibly because of underlying conditions, maybe exacerbated by COVID. I'd just like to sort of focus on that. There are also reports that a majority of the people aged above 60 in China aren't vaccinated. I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I mean, the rate is quite low. Shanghai residents over 60, only 38% have received 3 shots of the local-made vaccine. That is really low. I think there are several reasons for it. One is that until very recently, the zero-COVID strategy here was rather successful. The daily infection numbers were so low that we felt very safe, and the incentive to get vaccinated was maybe not as high as in other countries. And also, especially among the elderly, there's quite a lot of skepticism against the vaccines, also against Western science in general. So I would say there are a lot of rumors, disinformation, so people are quite cautious of getting vaccinated. We actually had quite a similar problem in Hong Kong. A lot of deaths were also caused in Hong Kong because many of the most vulnerable, the elderly, were not vaccinated.
You talked about the zero COVID strategy and that people felt comfortable with this strategy in place. Just generally, Fabian, from the conversations that you have with people in Beijing and in other parts of China, do you get the sense that there is overall support for the government's zero COVID policy when nearly every other country is learning to live with the virus?
I mean, the public opinion is quite split. Those affected by the lockdowns in Shanghai, they're openly protesting it. Many of them are criticizing it. There are even like fist fights against health workers. I mean, really, it's really an intense situation. And I don't think many people in Shanghai support it anymore. However, in the rest of the country, or especially in parts that are not affected right now by lockdowns, there's basically more support for it. And we also should not forget that the censorship is really deleting a lot of social media postings that are critical, and the domestic media, the only available media, so to speak, here in China, is always spinning it in a positive way. So what they report about Shanghai is quite ignorant to the real suffering of the people.
Fabian Kretschmer in Beijing. We'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you so much for joining us today.